My name is Morgan, and I'm 27 years old. Where I come from, college was considered a waste of money, a luxury for rich kids who didn't know the value of honest work. When I showed my parents my straight A report cards, they'd shrug and say, "Grades don't pay bills." My dream of becoming an engineer seemed impossible until my Uncle David stepped in. He saw potential my parents couldn't recognize and funded my entire education against their wishes. Last month at my industry award ceremony, I watched in shock as my parents told colleagues they had sacrificed everything for my education. The same education they once called worthless, the same education they made me choose over their love. While I share how I navigated this painful journey between family loyalty and personal truth, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to choose between your dreams and family expectations. I grew up in Millerville, a small manufacturing town in Ohio, where the factory whistle punctuated our days like clockwork. My father Jack worked at the steel mill for 25 years, coming home with calloused hands and a perpetual layer of metal dust that never quite washed away. My mother Linda worked the checkout at the local grocery store, recognizing every customer by name and often by their regular purchases. They were hardworking people who provided a stable, if modest, home. Our small three-bedroom house was clean and well-maintained, but luxuries were few. Family vacations meant camping at the state park an hour away. New clothes came from discount stores or as hand-me-downs from cousins. Despite the financial limitations, I never felt deprived of necessities, only opportunities. "College is for people with money to burn," my father would say whenever the subject arose at dinner. I never set foot in a university, and I've kept food on this table for 25 years. My mother would nod in agreement. All those kids with fancy degrees end up moving back home anyway. Better to learn something practical. This perspective wasn't unique to my parents. In Millerville, practical skills were valued above theoretical knowledge. Factory work, construction, retail, and service jobs were the expected career paths. Those who pursued higher education were often viewed with a mixture of suspicion and resentment, as if their ambitions somehow betrayed their working-class roots. I first realized I might be different in third grade when my teacher, Mrs. Hoffman, pulled me aside after class. "Morgan, your math abilities are exceptional," she said, showing me a perfect quiz with a gold star. "Have you ever thought about joining the math club?" When I mentioned the math club at dinner that night, my father chuckled. "What's the point of joining a math club? Calculators exist, you know." My mother was slightly more encouraging. "As long as it doesn't interfere with your chores, I suppose it's fine." Despite their lukewarm response, I joined the club and discovered I had a natural aptitude for numbers patterns and problem solving. Throughout elementary school, I collected academic achievements that my parents acknowledged with passive indifference. Perfect attendance certificates, spelling bee trophies, and math competition ribbons were met with brief nods or comments like, "That's nice, but don't let it go to your head." My Uncle David entered the picture more prominently when I was 11. My father's younger brother by 6 years, David had taken a different path. He'd secured scholarships to college and eventually earned his PhD in physics. By the time I was in middle school, he was an associate professor at a university about 2 hours from Millerville. Family gatherings always carried an undercurrent of tension between my father and Uncle David. Their conversations were polite but strained, especially when education came up. "How's life in the ivory tower?" my father would ask, with a hint of mockery. "Challenging, but rewarding," David would reply evenly. "My research is making good progress." I noticed that Uncle David always took time to talk with me during these gatherings, asking about school in a way my parents never did. When I mentioned my science fair project on renewable energy, his eyes lit up. "That sounds fascinating, Morgan. What made you interested in that topic?" No one had ever asked me why I was interested in something before. The question itself felt like validation. When my science fair project won first place at the county level, qualifying for the state competition, my parents' response was predictably muted. "That's nice," my mother said, barely looking up from preparing dinner. "But don't forget you promised to babysit for the Hendersons this weekend." My father glanced at the blue ribbon and display board. "Looks complicated. Hope it doesn't give you unrealistic ideas about your future." That evening, I received my first email from Uncle David. My aunt had told him about my win, and he'd written to congratulate me. Your project shows remarkable insight for someone your age, he wrote. If you're interested, I can send you some articles about the latest research in renewable energy. That email marked the beginning of our secret correspondence. Uncle David became my academic mentor from afar, sending articles, book recommendations, and encouragement. He asked questions that challenged my thinking and suggested resources that expanded my horizons far beyond what was available in Millerville. When my parents discovered our communication several months later, my father was furious. "What's this about?" he demanded, holding up a printed article about engineering scholarships that David had sent me. "Is my brother trying to fill your head with nonsense? It's just information, Dad being them," I tried to explain. "Uncle David thought I might be interested." "Well, he should mind his own business," my father snapped. "And you should focus on realistic goals. This family doesn't have money to waste on college." The incident created additional tension between the brothers, with my father calling David to stop interfering in our family. But it didn't end our communication. It just drove it underground. Uncle David and I continued to exchange emails through a new account he helped me set up. And occasionally, he would mail materials to my friend Jessica's house to avoid my parents' detection. As middle school gave way to high school, the divide between my parents' expectations and my aspirations grew wider. My academic achievements continued to accumulate, but they remained largely uncelebrated at home. When I brought home a perfect score on the state standardized test, my father's response was, "Tests don't show common sense." Meanwhile, Uncle David's encouragement remained steady and specific. When I expressed interest in engineering, he sent information about different specializations and introduced me via email to several female engineers in his professional network. During this time, I began to understand that the tension between my father and Uncle David wasn't just about education. It was about fundamentally different worldviews and perhaps some long-standing sibling rivalry. "Your father has always been suspicious of academia," Uncle David explained during one of our phone calls. "He thinks it's all theoretical knowledge with no practical application." "But engineering is practical," I argued. "It's about solving real problems." "I know that and you know that," David replied. "But sometimes people become so entrenched in their views that they can't see alternatives." By the end of my sophomore year in high school, I had privately set my goal. I would become an engineer, with or without my parents' blessing. I just didn't know yet how I would overcome the financial barriers that stood in my way. Junior year of high school marked the beginning of serious college preparation. While my classmates casually discussed potential schools, often limited to state universities or community colleges within commuting distance, I harbored secret ambitions for top engineering programs. My guidance counselor, Mr. Peterson, was the first adult in Millerville to take my ambitions seriously. During a scheduled meeting to discuss my course selections, he reviewed my transcript with widening eyes. "Morgan, these grades are exceptional," he said, flipping through pages of perfect scores. "Have you thought about applying to competitive engineering programs? With your academic record and some solid extracurriculars, you could be looking at scholarship opportunities." For the first time, someone other than Uncle David was affirming that my dreams might be financially possible. Mr. Peterson helped me map out a strategy advanced placement courses, SAT prep, strategic extracurricular activities, and potential scholarship applications. At home, I carefully avoided mentioning these conversations. Instead, I simply requested permission to join the robotics club and math team, framing them as after-school activities rather than college application builders. My mother agreed with her usual caveat: as long as your grades don't slip and you keep up with your responsibilities at home. Uncle David became even more involved during this period, sending practice SAT questions and arranging for me to visit his university campus under the guise of a day trip with friends. By walking among the historic buildings, watching students engaged in lively discussions, and touring the engineering facilities solidified my determination. This was the world I wanted to join. "I can see you here," Uncle David said as we sat on a bench in the quad watching students hurry between classes. "Or at any top program, you have the intellect and the drive. But not the money," I reminded him. He looked at me thoughtfully. "Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Focus on the applications first." During senior year, I applied to 12 engineering programs ranging from safety schools to highly competitive institutions. I used the computer at the public library, and Jessica's home to complete applications had recommendation letters sent directly to my email account and listed Jessica's address for correspondence to avoid my parents' questions. The acceptance letters began arriving in early spring, each one delivered to Jessica's house and opened with trembling fingers in her bedroom. But it was the letter from Westridge University that left me speechless, not only acceptance into their prestigious engineering program, but also a substantial merit scholarship that would cover about 60% of the tuition costs. Even with the scholarship, however, the remaining costs were far beyond my family's means, or what my parents would be willing to pay for an education they didn't value. I knew the moment had come to have the conversation I had been dreading. I chose a Sunday evening when both parents were relaxed after dinner. My hands shook as I placed the acceptance letter on the kitchen table. "I need to talk to you both about something important," I began. My mother looked up from her crossword puzzle with mild interest. My father muted the TV in the adjoining living room, but didn't turn it off completely. "I've been accepted to Westridge University's engineering program," I said, pointing to the letter, "with a scholarship that covers most of the tuition." For a moment, neither of them responded. Then my father unmuted the TV and turned back to his show. "Dad, did you hear what I said?" He sighed heavily and turned toward me. "Morgan, we've been clear about this. College is not in our budget, scholarship or not. There are still costs involved, and we don't have money for dormitories and textbooks and whatever else they charge for." "But this is a great opportunity," I persisted. "Westridge has one of the best engineering programs in the country." My mother picked up the letter, scanning it with a frown. "Honey, even with this scholarship, the remaining amount is more than we can afford. And what's the point? You could get a perfectly good job at the factory office without all this debt." "I don't want to work at the factory office," I said, feeling my throat tighten. "I want to be an engineer. I want to build things and solve problems." My father turned off the TV completely now, his expression hardening. "This is your uncle's influence, isn't it? He's been filling your head with these fancy ideas, making you think you're too good for honest work." "This has nothing to do with Uncle David," I lied. "This is about my future, what I want to do with my life." The conversation deteriorated rapidly. My father accused me of betraying the family's values, while my mother repeated concerns about costs and debts. When I mentioned student loans, my father exploded. "No daughter of mine is starting adult life in debt for a useless piece of paper," he shouted. "This family works for our money. We don't borrow it for luxuries." "Education isn't a luxury," I argued back, tears streaming down my face. "It's an investment in my future." "That's enough," my father said firmly. "The answer is no. No money, no support, no discussion. You want to work after graduation, fine. You want to take classes at the community college while living here, we can talk. But this fantasy of going away to some fancy university, it ends now." I called Uncle David that night, sobbing into the phone as I recounted the confrontation. "I knew they wouldn't support it," I cried, "but I thought maybe when they saw the scholarship—" "Morgan, listen to me," Uncle David said calmly. "This is your life and your future. If engineering is truly what you want to pursue, then I want to help make that happen. How they won't contribute anything, and even with loans. Sarah and I have discussed this," he interrupted, referring to my aunt. "We want to support your education financially. Tuition, housing, books, whatever the scholarship doesn't cover." His offer left me speechless. It was more generous than anything I could have imagined, but I also recognized the family conflict it would create. "Dad will never forgive you," I whispered. "Or me." "Maybe not right away," Uncle David admitted. "But sometimes doing the right thing isn't the same as doing the easy thing. You have extraordinary potential, Morgan. Don't let it go unrealized because of fear or family pressure." The next day, I gathered my courage and informed my parents of my decision to accept Westridge's offer with Uncle David's financial support. The resulting argument was even worse than I had anticipated. My father called Uncle David a manipulative elitist who was stealing his daughter. My mother cried and accused me of thinking I was too good for my hometown. The ultimatum came from my father: If you choose this path, don't expect our support. Not financially, not emotionally. You're choosing your uncle and his fancy world over your real family. Through tears, I packed my belongings that weekend and moved temporarily to Jessica's house until dormitories opened. My parents didn't help me pack, didn't offer to drive me to campus, and didn't say goodbye when I left. Their silence spoke volumes about the choice I had made and the price I would pay for my education. The sprawling Westridge University campus intimidated me on move-in day. Gothic stone buildings and manicured lawns stretched in every direction, populated by confident-looking students who seemed to belong there naturally. I felt like an imposter as Uncle David and Aunt Sarah helped me carry boxes to my small dormitory room. Everyone looked so prepared, I whispered to Uncle David as we watched groups of freshmen navigating the grounds with ease. So do you, he assured me. Remember, they can't see your hometown or your bank account. They only see another bright student ready to learn. Despite his encouragement, my first weeks at Westridge were difficult. While I excelled academically, the social adjustment was challenging. Many of my classmates came from privileged backgrounds with parents who were doctors, lawyers, or executives. They talked about family vacations to Europe and prep schools I had never heard of. When they asked about my family, I gave vague answers, avoiding the painful truth that my parents had essentially disowned me for pursuing education. The engineering program was rigorous, demanding more critical thinking and independent work than anything I had experienced in high school. For the first time, I wasn't automatically at the top of every class. I had to study harder than ever before, often staying in the library until closing time to complete problem sets and lab reports. During these challenging adjustments, Uncle David's support remained constant. We spoke weekly by phone, and he would patiently listen to my academic struggles, offering guidance without making me feel inadequate. When I expressed doubts about belonging at Westridge, he reminded me of the acceptance letter and scholarship that had recognized my potential. Imposter syndrome is common, he explained, even among students from the most privileged backgrounds. The difference is they've been conditioned to believe they belong in these spaces, while you've been told the opposite. Aunt Sarah provided different but equally valuable support. She sent care packages with homemade cookies and handwritten notes of encouragement. When I mentioned feeling underdressed compared to my peers, she helped me find professional clothing on a budget. Their consistent presence in my life eased the pain of my parents' absence, though it never eliminated it completely. I attempted to contact my parents several times during that first semester. I sent letters describing my classes and new experiences, trying to share my excitement without sounding boastful. The first few went unanswered. Finally, after my third letter, my mother sent a brief response. "Glad you're doing well. Things are the same here. Dad's still not ready to talk." During Thanksgiving break, I couldn't face returning to Millerville, where I might encounter my parents, so I accepted Aunt Sarah and Uncle David's invitation to join them. Their modest faculty housing became my holiday home, and they introduced me to their university friends as our brilliant niece, the engineering student, with obvious pride. By the end of freshman year, I had found my footing academically and socially. I joined the Society of Women Engineers and found community among other female students navigating the male-dominated field. I secured a campus job in the engineering computer lab that provided spending money and reduced the financial burden on Uncle David and Aunt Sarah. Sophomore year brought new confidence and my first major internship opportunity with an engineering firm in Boston. When I called Uncle David with the news, his enthusiastic response highlighted the stark contrast with my parents' continued silence. "That's incredible, Morgan. These internships can lead to full-time offers after graduation. I'm so proud of you." After 2 years of minimal contact, I made another attempt at reconciliation with my parents. During spring break of sophomore year, I drove to Millerville and appeared unannounced at their doorstep. My mother's shock was evident as she opened the door. "Morgan, we weren't expecting you." The reunion was awkward and strained. My father eventually emerged from the garage, but offered only a stiff nod and brief "hello" before returning to his project. My mother made small talk about neighbors and local events, but carefully avoided asking about my education or experiences. When I volunteered information about my classes and internship, her responses were polite but disengaged. "That's nice, dear. Would you like some coffee?" I left after 2 painful hours, understanding that while the door wasn't completely closed, genuine reconciliation would require changes my parents weren't yet willing to make. Despite this disappointment, I channeled my energy into academic excellence. By junior year, I was thriving in the mechanical engineering program, conducting research with a respected professor, and maintaining a near-perfect GPA. Senior year brought multiple job offers months before graduation, including a prestigious position with an aerospace firm that offered a starting salary higher than anything available in Millerville. Uncle David and Aunt Sarah sat proudly in the audience at my graduation ceremony, cheering loudly as I walked across the stage. The 2 seats I had reserved for my parents remained empty. "They're missing out," Aunt Sarah whispered, squeezing my hand as we took photos afterward. But we couldn't be prouder. And then that evening, I received a text message from my mother, "Congratulations on graduating." It wasn't much, but it was the first acknowledgement of my educational achievement in 4 years. It felt like a tiny crack in a very thick wall. The aerospace firm that hired me was based in Columbus, Ohio, close enough to Millerville that I could visit if relations improved, but far enough to maintain the independent life I had built. My starting position as a design engineer came with a comfortable salary that allowed me to rent a pleasant apartment and begin building savings. For the first time in my life, I had financial security, independent of anyone else's support. After settling into my new job and apartment, I reached out to Uncle David about repaying his financial support. "I've calculated everything you and Aunt Sarah contributed to my education," I explained, showing him a spreadsheet during a weekend visit. "With my current salary, I can repay the full amount over 5 years without hardship." Uncle David shook his head firmly. "We didn't support your education as a loan, Morgan. It was an investment in your future and in you as a person." "But it was so much money," I protested. "I want to repay you." "If you insist on doing something with that money," he said thoughtfully, "consider this invested in someone else's education. Continue the cycle of support for another student who might be facing similar barriers." His suggestion resonated deeply. Within months, I had established a small scholarship fund for first-generation college students from Millerville and surrounding communities. The Breaking Barriers Scholarship would help students whose families couldn't or wouldn't support their higher education dreams. As my professional reputation grew, so did my confidence. I delivered presentations at industry conferences, contributed to innovative projects, and earned the respect of senior colleagues. After 2 years at the aerospace firm, I was featured in the company newsletter for my work on a fuel efficiency project. This small recognition unexpectedly became the bridge back to my family. A former neighbor from Millerville, who worked in administrative support at my company, showed the newsletter to my parents. My mother called me for the first time in years. "Your father and I saw the article," she said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar note of hesitation. "They seem to think highly of you there." "Yes," I replied, unsure how to navigate this fragile reconnection. "The project went well. We thought maybe, if you're not too busy, you might come for dinner sometime. See the old house." The invitation, however awkward, was a significant step. I accepted, and the following weekend drove to Millerville for the first voluntary family dinner in nearly 6 years. The reunion was strained, but civil. My parents' home was exactly as I remembered it, though they had remodeled the kitchen with new countertops and appliances. My mother had prepared my childhood favorite meals, and my father made stilted attempts at conversation about my job, carefully avoiding any mention of my education. "So you design things?" he asked between bites of pot roast. "Yes, I work on mechanical systems for aircraft. Currently, I'm helping develop more fuel-efficient engine components." "Sounds complicated," he offered, which was more acknowledgement than he had ever given my academic interests before. Over the following months, our relationship gradually thawed. I visited every few weeks for dinner, each time finding the conversation slightly less awkward. My mother began asking specific questions about my work and life in Columbus. My father remained more reserved, but no longer left the room when education was mentioned. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a routine visit, I noticed college brochures on the kitchen counter. "Are these yours?" I asked my mother, picking up a community college catalog. She looked embarrassed. Your father's actually. He's thinking of taking some night classes in small business management. The factory's offering partial tuition reimbursement. The revelation stunned me. My father, who had dismissed education as worthless for decades, was considering classes himself. When he came in from the garage, I carefully mentioned the brochures. Mom says you're thinking about taking some classes. He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. Just looking into it. Factories changing a lot of their processes. Thought some additional skills might be useful. Though he downplayed it, this represented a significant shift in his perspective. I offered encouragement without pushing too hard, conscious of the fragile reconnection we were building. As my professional success grew more visible, I noticed a subtle change in how my parents spoke about me to others. At a chance encounter with family friends at a local restaurant, my mother introduced me as our daughter, the engineer at Meridian Aerospace. There was unmistakable pride in her voice, though we both knew she had played no role in supporting my path to that career. The most dramatic shift occurred after I received notification that I would be receiving the Rising Star Award from the Ohio Engineering Association, recognizing outstanding contributions by engineers under 30. The award ceremony would include a formal dinner in Columbus with industry leaders and established professionals. They allow guests, I mentioned during a phone call with my mother. I was planning to invite Uncle David and Aunt Sarah since they've been so supportive, but I wanted to see if you and Dad might be interested in attending as well. The silence on the line lasted so long, I thought we had been disconnected. Your father and I would be honored, she finally said, her voice strained with emotion I couldn't quite interpret. Just let us know the date and what we should wear. Uncle David expressed concerns when I told him about inviting my parents. I'm glad you're rebuilding your relationship, he said carefully. But are you prepared for potential tensions at such an important event? I think it's time we all moved forward, I replied. Besides, I'll have you and Aunt Sarah there for support if things get uncomfortable. The evening of the award ceremony arrived with a mix of professional excitement and personal anxiety. I had arranged for my parents and Uncle David's family to sit at the same table, hoping the public setting would discourage any open conflict. When my parents arrived at the hotel ballroom, I was struck by how out of place they looked. My father uncomfortable in his seldom-worn suit, my mother clutching her purse nervously as she scanned the crowd of unfamiliar faces. Uncle David and Aunt Sarah arrived shortly after greeting me with warm hugs before politely acknowledging my parents. The initial interaction was stiff but civil as everyone took their seats at the assigned table. Throughout the dinner, I observed the stark contrast in how my family members navigated the professional environment. Uncle David engaged effortlessly with other attendees, discussing recent industry developments and introducing my parents with diplomatic courtesy. My parents remained mostly silent, watching the interactions with expressions that shifted between discomfort and fascination. When one of my colleagues stopped by our table, she enthusiastically shared her experience working with me on a recent project. Morgan has such innovative approaches to design challenges, she told my table. That fuel efficiency solution was brilliant. We always knew she was smart, my mother replied with a tentative smile. Even as a little girl, she was always figuring things out. The comment wasn't exactly false, but it conveniently omitted their active discouragement of my academic pursuits. I let it pass without correction, focusing on maintaining a pleasant atmosphere. The award presentation began after dinner, as the presenter read my biography highlighting my education at Westridge University and rapid professional advancement. I watched my parents' expressions. My father stared straight ahead, his face unreadable. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. This year's Rising Star Award goes to Morgan Mitchell, whose innovative work in aerospace engineering has already made significant contributions to fuel efficiency technology. As I walked to the podium to accept the award, the applause was gratifying but secondary to the knowledge that both sides of my divided family were present to witness this milestone. The glass award felt substantial in my hands as I turned to address the audience. Thank you for this tremendous honor. I began following the usual acknowledgments of the association and my company. Then I reached the personal portion of my speech. I would not be standing here today without the unwavering support of my Uncle David and Aunt Sarah Mitchell, I said, looking directly at them. When pursuing higher education seemed financially impossible, they stepped forward not just with financial support, but with the emotional encouragement that helped me believe in myself. Their investment in my future made everything else possible. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father shifting uncomfortably in his seat. My mother's smile had frozen in place. I also want to acknowledge my parents, Jack and Linda Mitchell. I continued, choosing my words carefully. Our path hasn't always been straightforward, but I appreciate their presence here tonight and the values of hard work and persistence they instilled in me. It was a diplomatic acknowledgement that offered recognition, without falsely crediting them for supporting my education. As I returned to the table with my award, the tension was palpable, despite the polite applause and congratulations from others. During the reception that followed, I was pulled into conversations with colleagues and industry contacts. When I finally had a moment to return to our table, I found my parents speaking with the association president, who was clearly impressed by something they had said. As I approached, I caught my father's words. "We always emphasize the importance of education in our family, sacrifice to make sure Morgan had the opportunities we didn't have ourselves." The blatant rewriting of history stopped me in my tracks. My mother nodded along, adding, "We're just so proud of how she's applied herself. We always knew she was destined for great things." The president noticed me and offered congratulations before moving on to other guests. I stood frozen, staring at my parents in disbelief. "What was that?" I asked, keeping my voice low but unable to hide my shock. "What was what?" My father responded defensively. "That story about sacrificing for my education and emphasizing its importance. You know that's not what happened." My mother touched my arm placatingly. "Morgan, don't make a scene. We're just proud of you." "You're lying about our history," I said firmly. "You actively opposed my education. You gave me an ultimatum to choose between family and college. You cut contact when I chose to pursue engineering." "That was a long time ago," my father muttered. "No need to air family business in public." Uncle David appeared at my side, sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" My father's expression hardened. "Family matter, David, not your concern." "It absolutely concerns me," I interjected. "They're taking credit for supporting my education, the same education they refused to acknowledge until it resulted in public recognition." "Morgan, please," my mother pleaded. "We're here to celebrate your achievement." "Yes, we are," I agreed. "And I'm grateful you came. But I won't participate in rewriting our family history. You didn't support my education. You actively opposed it. Uncle David and Aunt Sarah made my degree possible, both financially and emotionally." My father's face flushed with anger. "So that's how it is. You're going to humiliate us in front of all these fancy people after we drove all this way to support you." "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone," I replied. "I just won't perpetuate a false narrative, not even to spare your feelings." The confrontation might have escalated further, but we were interrupted by a senior executive from my company who wanted to introduce me to a potential client. By the time I finished the business conversation, my parents had gathered their belongings and left without saying goodbye. Only Uncle David, Aunt Sarah, and an empty champagne glass on the table indicated they had been there at all. The aftermath of the award ceremony created shockwaves through my extended family. My parents returned to Millerville and immediately called various relatives to share their version of events, that I had publicly embarrassed them and chosen my uncle over my real family yet again. The morning after the ceremony, I woke to multiple text messages from cousins and aunts ranging from concerned questions to outright accusations of ingratitude. My mother had sent a single message: "Hope you're happy with yourself. Your father is devastated." Uncle David called to check on me as I was sorting through the digital fallout. "How are you holding up?" "Processing," I replied honestly. I knew confronting them was risky, but I couldn't let them claim credit for something they actively opposed. "For what it's worth, I think you handled it with remarkable restraint," he said. Many people would have publicly corrected them during the speech itself. His support was comforting, but it didn't erase the complicated emotions I was feeling. I had hoped the award ceremony might represent a new chapter in our family relationship. Instead, it had exposed the unresolved tensions and my parents' unwillingness to acknowledge our actual history. I took a few days to reflect before responding to my mother's text. "I'm not happy about what happened," I wrote, "but I won't participate in pretending you and Dad supported my education when the reality was the opposite. I'm open to building a relationship based on truth, not convenient fictions." My father maintained his silence, but my mother responded with a defensive message about how they had always wanted what was best for me and how different people show support in different ways. The message concluded with, "If you insist on clinging to old grievances, that's your choice." Meanwhile, the family division grew more pronounced. Some relatives sided firmly with my parents, arguing that family loyalty should outweigh petty concerns about who paid for what. Others, particularly younger cousins, who had their own educational aspirations, reached out privately to express support for my position. My cousin Ellie, who was preparing for college herself, called me directly. "Is it true that Uncle Jack and Aunt Linda refuse to support your college education? Mom and Dad won't give me a straight answer." "It's true," I confirmed, seeing no reason to shield her from reality. "They believed college was a waste of money and refused any financial or emotional support. When Uncle David offered to help, they gave me an ultimatum: choose education or family." "That's horrible," she said quietly. "I'm applying to nursing programs and my parents are being difficult about the costs. I was hoping the stories about your situation were exaggerated." "They weren't," I assured her. "But that doesn't mean your parents will make the same choices. Have you looked into scholarship opportunities?" Our conversation shifted to practical advice about applications and financial aid, establishing a mentor relationship I hadn't anticipated but welcomed. Over the following weeks, several other young relatives reached out with similar questions, suggesting my experience had become something of a cautionary tale within the family. 3 weeks after the award ceremony, Uncle David invited me to Sunday dinner, mentioning casually that my father had requested to meet with both of us. "He called me directly, which hasn't happened in years," David explained. He sounded, well, not exactly apologetic, but less combative than usual. I approached the meeting with cautious optimism. When I arrived at Uncle David's home, my father was already there, sitting stiffly in the living room while Aunt Sarah offered coffee. My mother was notably absent. "Your mother wasn't feeling up to coming," my father explained without prompting. "This isn't easy for her." The initial conversation was awkward, focused on neutral topics like the weather and local sports teams. Eventually, Uncle David gently steered us toward the elephant in the room. "Jack, you mentioned on the phone that you wanted to discuss what happened at the award ceremony." My father nodded, his expression a complex mixture of pride and discomfort. "I've been doing some thinking," he began gruffly, "about Morgan's education and all that. Maybe I didn't handle things the best way back then." Coming from my father, this oblique acknowledgement was significant. I remained silent, allowing him space to continue. "The thing is," he continued, staring at his coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes, "I never had those opportunities myself. College wasn't even discussed as a possibility in our family." "I remember," Uncle David said quietly. "Dad made it clear we were expected to work at the factory after high school." "But you didn't," my father said, a hint of the old resentment coloring his tone. "You found a way out." "I found a different path," Uncle David corrected gently. "Not better or worse, just different." My father nodded slowly. When Morgan started talking about engineering and universities, it felt like he paused, seemingly searching for words, like she was saying our life wasn't good enough, like we hadn't given her enough. This glimpse into his perspective was revealing. What I had experienced as opposition to my dreams had been at least partly a defensive response to perceived criticism of his life choices. "That was never my intention," I said carefully. "I was grateful for everything you and Mom provided. I just wanted different opportunities than were available in Millerville." "I see that now," my father admitted. "Watching you at that award thing, seeing how those people respected you. You've built something important." The conversation continued for over an hour, not resolving all issues, but creating space for understanding. My father acknowledged in his limited way that opposing my education had been a mistake born of his own insecurities. While he didn't directly address the false claims at the award ceremony, his presence at this meeting suggested some recognition of the truth. As the meeting concluded, my father awkwardly extended an invitation. "Your mother's birthday is next month. Family dinner at the house. We'd like you to come." After a pause, he added with visible effort, "David and Sarah too, if they want." The invitation represented a significant shift. For the first time, he was acknowledging Uncle David's legitimate place in my life, and by extension in the family. In the weeks that followed, I continued to process this evolving family dynamic through sessions with my therapist, Dr. Winters. "They're making steps toward acknowledgement," I explained during one session, "but there's still this reluctance to fully own what happened." Changing long-held narratives is difficult, Dr. Winters noted, especially when those narratives protect people from acknowledging their mistakes. Your father's limited acknowledgement may be all he's capable of right now. So I should just accept that they'll never fully admit how they treated me. Not necessarily, she replied thoughtfully. But you might consider what level of acknowledgement you need to move forward. Perfect recognition of past wrongs might not be possible, but is the current progress enough to build a relationship that serves you well? Her question stayed with me as I prepared for my mother's birthday dinner. I decided to bring a special gift, a framed photograph of me receiving the engineering award with a simple inscription, "Thanks for being there for the celebration. Love, Morgan." The gift acknowledged their presence at a significant moment without falsely crediting them for the achievement itself. It offered a path forward that neither denied the past nor demanded explicit apologies they might never provide. The birthday dinner itself was a tentative new beginning. Uncle David and Aunt Sarah attended their first visit to my parents' home in nearly a decade. The conversation was occasionally strained, but largely civil, focusing on current events rather than past conflicts. My mother seemed genuinely touched by the framed photo, placing it prominently on the mantel, alongside family photos spanning decades. The visual integration of my professional achievement into the family narrative felt symbolically important, though imperfect. As months passed, our family relationships continued to evolve. My parents never fully acknowledged their opposition to my education in direct terms, but their behavior shifted noticeably. My father asked occasional questions about my work, making genuine efforts to understand engineering concepts that had once seemed threatening. My mother proudly showed the award photo to visitors, though her explanations of the circumstances remained carefully curated. The most significant moment of indirect acknowledgement came when my young cousin Ellie was accepted to nursing school with a partial scholarship. At the family gathering celebrating her acceptance, my father approached her parents with unexpected directness. "Make sure you support her in this," he said loud enough for several of us to overhear. "Education's important. Don't make the mistakes some of us did." Though he didn't look at me while saying it, the message was clear. He couldn't directly admit his failures to me, but he could try to prevent others from repeating them. Meanwhile, I continued building the Breaking Barriers Scholarship Fund, eventually partnering with Westridge University to create a formalized program for first-generation students from working-class backgrounds. When the local newspaper ran a feature about the scholarship, including my personal story of overcoming family opposition to education, I braced for backlash from my parents. Instead, my mother called with a surprising question. "Is there some way we could contribute to your scholarship fund? It wouldn't be much, but..." The offer, small as it might be, financially represented a profound shift in their attitude toward education. I accepted gratefully, sending them information about how to donate. Uncle David, who had watched this entire journey unfold, observed with characteristic insight. "They may never be able to say the words 'we were wrong,' but they're showing it in their actions. For people of their generation and background, that might be the closest thing to an apology you'll receive." I recognized the truth in his assessment. Perfect resolution with clear acknowledgement of past wrongs might be the stuff of movies. But real family reconciliation often comes in smaller, messier forms. A family dinner invitation that includes once estranged relatives, a photograph placed on the mantel, a small donation to a scholarship fund. 1 year after the award ceremony confrontation, I was invited to speak at Millerville High School's Career Day. To my surprise, both my parents attended, sitting quietly in the back of the auditorium, as I shared my journey from curious Millerville student to aerospace engineer. Without naming names or assigning blame, I spoke honestly about overcoming educational barriers and finding support in unexpected places. I emphasized the importance of pursuing dreams, even when the path isn't clear or supported by everyone in your life. After the presentation, several students approached with questions about engineering and college applications. As the crowd thinned, I noticed my parents waiting nearby, my father awkwardly holding a small bouquet of flowers from their garden. "Good speech," he said gruffly, extending the flowers. "Thought you might like these." My mother added, "Those students were really listening to you. You might have changed some lives today." And it wasn't an apology or a full acknowledgement of our past. But in that moment in my childhood high school with flowers from their garden in my hands, it felt like acceptance, not just of my success, but of the difficult path I had taken to achieve it. As I approach my 28th birthday, reflecting on the journey that brought me here feels both painful and necessary. The narrative of my education remains a complex tapestry of rejection, support, achievement, and gradual reconciliation. While the most acute family conflicts have eased, their echoes continue to shape my relationships and perspective. The Breaking Barriers Scholarship now supports 5 students annually, with plans to expand as the endowment grows. Each recipient has their own story of family resistance or financial obstacles to education. During our annual scholarship dinner, I share parts of my experience, emphasizing that family resistance to education often comes from complex places: fear, insecurity, generational patterns, rather than simple opposition to success. The hardest lesson I've learned, I tell these students, is that acknowledging truth doesn't have to mean severing family ties. You can honor your journey without requiring perfect understanding from those who weren't ready to support it. This philosophy has guided my evolving relationship with my parents. We maintain regular contact now with monthly family dinners and holiday celebrations that include Uncle David and Aunt Sarah. The conversations remain carefully navigated around certain subjects, but the silent treatment and outright hostility have been replaced by a tentative acceptance. My father's attitude has shifted most dramatically. Last Christmas, he surprised me with a subscription to an engineering journal and awkwardly asked questions about my latest project. My mother has become the unofficial family photographer, insisting on pictures at every gathering, perhaps her way of ensuring no more family history goes undocumented or becomes subject to revision. Uncle David remains my most trusted mentor and supporter. Our Sunday brunches have become a cherished tradition where we discuss everything from complex engineering challenges to family dynamics. His guidance has extended beyond my education to career advancement and personal growth. "I've been thinking," he said during a recent brunch, "about how your story has already created ripples through the family. Have you noticed how many of the younger cousins are now talking about college?" He was right. Beyond Ellie, who was thriving in her nursing program, 3 other young relatives had begun pursuing higher education with varying levels of family support. My experience had become both a cautionary tale and an inspiration, demonstrating both the costs and rewards of educational persistence. Perhaps the most meaningful development came last month when my father called to tell me about a local teenager he had met through his community college small business class. "Smart kid, good with numbers, but his parents are giving him a hard time about wanting to study finance," he explained. "Reminded me of someone." After an awkward pause, he continued, "I told him about that scholarship thing of yours. Gave him your email if that's okay. Thought maybe you could talk to him." That simple referral represented a profound evolution. My father, who had once actively opposed my educational aspirations, was now connecting other young people with resources to pursue theirs. While he might never fully verbalize his regrets about our past, his actions spoke volumes. The young man Javier did email me. During our video call, I recognized the familiar conflict in his situation: parents who equated pursuing education with rejecting family values. I shared resources, scholarship information, and strategies for maintaining family connections while pursuing his own path. "My dad said your story is similar to mine," Javier mentioned hesitantly near the end of our call. In some ways, I acknowledged, though every family situation is unique. He said you succeeded even when people didn't believe in you. Javier continued. He seemed to really admire that. Hearing that my father had spoken of my journey with admiration to a stranger was unexpectedly moving. The public acknowledgement he couldn't quite offer directly to me, he had shared with someone who needed to hear it. This gradual healing continues to unfold in small moments. At a recent family gathering, I overheard my mother telling a distant relative, Morgan was always determined. When she sets her mind to something, there's no stopping her. The comment wasn't exactly an acknowledgement of past opposition, but it represented a shift from the narrative of ungrateful daughter to one of admirable determination. These incremental changes in perspective suggest that while the past cannot be undone, its interpretation can evolve. Uncle David perhaps summarized it best during our most recent conversation. The truth about family, he reflected, is that healing rarely comes in dramatic moments of perfect understanding. It comes in small adjustments over time, a changed perspective here, a different choice there. The important thing is movement in the right direction. I've come to appreciate the wisdom in his perspective. My parents may never fully acknowledge how their opposition to education affected me, but they have demonstrated growth through their evolving attitudes toward education, their tentative support of my scholarship program, and their increasing comfort with Uncle David's role in our family. For my part, I've learned that standing firm in my truth doesn't require others to perfectly recognize it. I can honor Uncle David's crucial support of my education without demanding that my parents fully acknowledge their failure to provide the same. I can accept their current efforts at reconciliation without requiring a complete accounting of past wrongs. This journey has taught me that family relationships exist on a spectrum rather than in absolutes. The parents who once issued an ultimatum to choose between family and education now display my engineering award on their mantle. The uncle who stepped in when support was lacking now sits at holiday dinners alongside the brother who once resented his interference. The boundaries between acknowledgement and denial, between acceptance and resistance, are more fluid than I once believed. As I continue building my career and expanding the scholarship program, I carry these complex family dynamics with me, not as wounds, but as wisdom. Each student I mentor through similar challenges benefits from the lessons of my journey, not just how to secure financial support for education, but how to navigate the emotional terrain of pursuing dreams without full family backing. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams? How did you balance honoring your path while maintaining family relationships? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if you know someone struggling with family resistance to their educational or career goals, please share this video with them. Sometimes knowing others have walked similar paths can provide the courage needed to continue. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and creating success on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and remember that standing in your truth while offering grace to others is one of life's most challenging but rewarding balances.